The world ends in water and thunder. For a 14-year-old fisherman named Manjiro, that world was a 10-meter wooden boat, and its end was a storm in the black heart of the Pacific. One moment he was hauling in a catch, the next the sky turned on him. The ocean, his provider, became his executioner. For 5 days the storm raged. It tore their sail to ribbons and snapped their oar like a twig. When the waves finally spit them out, it wasn't onto the shores of their home, Japan. It was onto a barren, bird-stained rock in the middle of nowhere. They were alive, but they were ghosts. They were shipwrecked subjects of a kingdom that had locked its doors to the world. A kingdom that decreed anyone who left its shores, even by accident, could never return, on pain of death. What Manjiro didn't know was that his old world had to die so a new one could be born. For 143 days they survived on rainwater and seabirds. Hope was a dwindling currency. Then, on the horizon, a monster appeared. A ship, yes, but a behemoth, a floating fortress that dwarfed their memory of any vessel. And on its deck were not men, but barbarians, tall, loud, with hair on their faces and eyes the color of the sea itself. They were shouting in a language that sounded like rocks grinding together. To Manjiro and his crew, this was not a rescue. It was an abduction by demons. They were being pulled from one hell into another, onto the deck of the American whaling ship, the John Howland. This was his first contact with the West, a world he didn't know existed, and one that was about to change him, and through him, the course of history. If you want to see how this single terrifying encounter reshaped a nation, make sure you're subscribed. The story only gets more unbelievable from here. On the deck of the John Howland, every single thing was a mystery. The sharp smell of whale oil, the dizzying height of the crow's nest, the way the barbarians worked with a loud, boisterous energy so different from the quiet efficiency of Japanese fishermen. The captain, a man named William Whitfield, saw something in the boy's sharp, observant eyes. He took Manjiro under his wing. He'd point to the deck and say, "Deck." He'd point to the sky and say, "Sky." Manjiro, a quick study, absorbed it all. The sailors, struggling with his Japanese name, gave him a new one, an American one, John Mung. He was no longer just Nakahama Manjiro, the fisherman from a forgotten village. He was becoming someone else, someone new. After months at sea, they reached their first port, Honolulu. It wasn't America. Not yet, but it was a world away from the homogeneous ordered society of Japan. Here, cultures collided in a chaotic, vibrant marketplace. Languages he'd never heard, faces he'd never seen, clothes of every color and cut. For his companions, this was too much. The chaos was terrifying. They saw only danger. They asked to be left there, hoping to find a ship that might, someday, risk sailing near Japan. But Manjiro was different. This chaos didn't scare him. It fascinated him. Captain Whitfield saw this spark and made an offer that would seal the boy's fate. "Come with me," he offered. "Come to my home. Come to America."
In 1843, Manjiro stepped onto the soil of Fairhaven, Massachusetts. If Honolulu was chaos, this was an impossible alien order. He had never seen a road so wide and flat. He had never seen a house with more than one story, let alone dozens of them, each with perfectly transparent walls of glass. In Japan, a man's worth was in his birth. A fisherman was a fisherman. A samurai was a samurai. Here, people walked with a confidence, a purpose, that seemed to ignore such rigid lines. He was taken into Captain Whitfield's own home, not as a servant, but as a son. The concept was so foreign it barely registered. He was a castaway, a peasant, being welcomed into the heart of a foreign family.
To understand this new world, he knew he had to learn its language, its secrets. Whitfield enrolled him in school. Imagine it, a 16-year-old who had battled the sea and mastered the art of whaling, now sitting beside 6-year-olds, struggling to learn his ABCs. The humiliation must have been immense, but his mind, starved for knowledge, was a sponge. While he struggled with letters, he excelled at numbers. Mathematics, the universal language, was where he first proved his worth. Soon the letters and words clicked into place. He devoured books, maps, newspapers. He wasn't just learning to read, he was decoding the blueprint of a civilization. America, he quickly learned, was built not just by hands, but by machines. In Japan, craftsmanship was an art passed down through generations. Here, it was a science, augmented by tools of incredible precision. He saw a printing press that could reproduce knowledge faster than 1,000 monks. He learned to use navigational instruments that could map the stars with pinpoint accuracy. He saw how Americans used machines to conquer nature, to bend it to their will. It wasn't about living in harmony with the world, as he had been taught. It was about mastering it. This fundamental difference in philosophy was a revelation. And then he saw the Iron Dragon, a creature of metal and fire, breathing smoke, screaming with a voice of steam. It moved without horses, without sails, pulling a chain of carriages behind it on iron tracks, the steam locomotive. To his 19th century Japanese eyes, this was not technology. It was sorcery. He had never traveled faster than a running horse. Now he sat inside the belly of this beast as it thundered across the countryside, devouring distance at a speed that felt like a violation of nature. The sheer power of it, the raw, untamed energy of the industrial age was concentrated in this one machine. He realized these people didn't just have better tools, they had harnessed a fundamentally different kind of power. Fairhaven had shown him the heart of America, its quiet, industrious towns, but he heard whispers of the Beast's Head, a city where the future was happening faster than anywhere else on Earth, a place called New York. The stories described a forest of ship masts, buildings that touched the clouds, and a ribbon of people that never stopped flowing. He knew he had to see it. He had to understand the source of this nation's incredible power and ambition. With his education and a trade, he set off, no longer just a passive observer, but an explorer in this bewildering new land. Nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for New York. The port was a dense forest of masts and sails from every corner of the globe. The noise was a physical assault, a symphony of iron-shod wheels on cobblestone, steam whistles, thousands of voices speaking dozens of languages, all at once. The buildings were not houses. They were man-made mountains of brick and stone, stacked one on top of the other, blocking out the sun. In his village in Japan, the loudest sound was the ocean. Here, the city itself roared louder than any storm. He was an ant in a land of giants, a silent drop in a thundering river of humanity. He saw how they tamed the landscape itself. In Japan, one would build a village around a river's natural crossing point. Here, if a river was in the way, they simply threw a bridge of iron and stone across it. They did not yield to nature, they commanded it to yield to them. These structures were not just practical, they were statements of intent. They were declarations of dominance over the natural world. A bridge was not just a way to get to the other side, it was a monument to the belief that no obstacle was insurmountable for human ingenuity. But the greatest shock came when the sun went down. In Japan, night was absolute. Darkness was broken only by the moon or the fragile, flickering light of a candle or a paper lantern. But in New York, they refused to surrender to the night. As dusk fell, men walked the streets with long poles, and one by one they set fire to the sky. Gaslight, a steady, brilliant, almost magical glow emanated from glass cages perched on iron poles. They had captured fire, tamed it, and forced it to illuminate their city. They had caged lightning in glass. It was a terrifying, beautiful, and deeply unsettling display of power. A city that had conquered the night itself. The technology was astounding, but the society was even more alien. He tried to understand its structure. Who was the daimyo? Where was the shogun? He learned of a system called democracy, where the leaders were chosen by the common people. The idea was so radical, it was almost incomprehensible. A farmer could have the same vote as a rich merchant. Power didn't just flow from the top down. It was a chaotic, messy, and vibrant struggle from all directions. There was no rigid caste system like the one he was born into. Here, a man could seemingly become anything or lose everything. It was a society of incredible opportunity and terrifying precarity. And in that small room, surrounded by the roar of the modern world, the prophecy began to form in his mind. It wasn't a mystical vision. It was a simple, terrifying calculation. His homeland, Japan, was a beautiful, meticulously crafted garden, governed by ancient traditions. But America was a raging forest fire of ambition and steel. The garden walls, the policy of isolation, they were made of paper. He knew with absolute certainty that this world, this force of iron and steam and democracy, was coming for Japan. It was not a matter of if, but when. And his country was utterly, totally unprepared. This knowledge became a heavy burden. He was living in the future, but his heart was in the past. He had seen the wonders of this new world, but he was haunted by visions of his home. He had to go back. It was an insane idea. He could be executed as soon as he stepped on shore. His friends, his family, everyone he knew would be put in danger. But how could he not? How could he live with the knowledge of the coming storm and not try to warn the people he loved? The desire to go home was no longer just homesickness. It was a mission. Getting back was a journey in itself. He needed money, a lot of it, to buy passage on a ship that could get him close to his home. he joined the Great California Gold Rush of 1849, trading the industrial East for the wild frontier. He risked his life alongside thousands of other dreamers, panning for gold in the cold rivers of the Sierra Nevada. After months of back-breaking labor, he scraped together just enough to fund his impossible journey. He bought passage on a ship bound for Shanghai, the first step on his perilous path home. In 1851, nearly 10 years after he was lost at sea, Manjiro finally saw the shores of his homeland. They were dropped off in a small boat and rowed to shore, where they were immediately arrested. To the local authorities, he was not a returning son. He was a ghost, a contaminated soul who had been corrupted by the outside world. He was a threat to the sacred purity of Japan. He was thrown in prison, and the long process of interrogation began.
For months, he was questioned. They asked him about the hairy barbarians, their food, their customs, their weapons. He told them everything. He drew maps of the world. He described the American system of government. He explained the power of the steam engine, the speed of the railroad, the size of their navy. They listened, but they didn't believe him. It sounded like a child's fantasy. Iron ships that moved against the wind? A country ruled by commoners? It was madness. He was telling them the truth, but it was a truth their world had no context for. He was a man from the future, speaking to men trapped in the past.
And then, in 1853, the prophecy came true. 4 black ships, larger and more menacing than anything Japan had ever seen, sailed uninvited into Edo Bay. They were American steam frigates led by Commodore Matthew Perry. They moved without sails, against the current, belching black smoke just as Manjiro had described. They were the Iron Dragons, made real. Everything the castaway had said, every unbelievable story was suddenly, terrifyingly true. The paper walls of Japan had just been breached. Suddenly, the ghost became a prophet. Manjiro was summoned by the shogun himself. His knowledge of English, his understanding of American technology and culture, was now the single most valuable asset in the entire country. The fisherman, who was sentenced to die for leaving Japan, was made a samurai. He became the bridge between 2 colliding worlds, helping his nation navigate the most dramatic and turbulent transition in its history. One boy's shipwreck didn't just change his life. It changed the destiny of an entire nation, opening the locked gates of Japan to the modern world. Manjiro's story shows how one person's unexpected journey can alter the course of history. Was it fate or just a random accident? What do you think is the biggest culture shock someone from the 1800s would experience if they saw our world today? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.